Hi, and welcome to a special edition of Musicians Hangout. But tonight we are hosting Women in Audio with our special guest, Dr. Susan Rogers. And this is live Herstory and question and answers. So thank you so much, Susan, for being here with us tonight.
It's a real pleasure to have these conversations. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much.
And we have Angie Gain from Atrocity Girl with us. Thank you, Angie, for co-hosting this with me tonight.
Yes, of course. Thank you. I've loved being a part of Women in Audio with you, Crash. It's been just amazing.
It's been a ride. It's been so many things, so many good things have been happening since we started it.
When did you start? How long has it been an organization?
You know, what's so funny, like only a few months, I think, and it's already over. Now we're at about 130.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah. So mostly Seattle and a few from around the globe, actually. So that's been an incredible growth. But for those who don't know, I'm sure everyone does, but Susan, you are an engineer and record producer, known for your work mainly with Prince, Purple Rain, and Sign of the Times, and Bare Naked Ladies as a producer. You've worked with David Byrne and Tricky, and you're a professor at Berkeley College of Music in the music production department. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. I also teach in the liberal arts department because I left the music business in the year 2000 after 22 years. And I earned a PhD. And so now I teach psychoacoustics and music cognition, as well as just the record production skills and the analog tape recording skills, because the kids are really into that.
I bet. I'm really missing the analog world, just the world in general, but
true that.
Yeah. But I'd love to hear more about psychoacoustics later.
Sure. Yeah, happy to talk about it. I love both, and I'm excited to have had to approach music from two perspectives. One is to be a music maker and make music for consumption for people, working with other artists. And then the other perspective is really kind of a 180. It's thinking about what do we all have in common? You know, not how are we different. That's how you have to think in the arts, is how can I be different from the rest? How can I stand out? But in the sciences, the question is, what do we all have in common? And that's just as interesting, although the perspective is completely the opposite.
Oh, right, exactly. I love that. Would you mind just telling a little bit of where you're from and not just how you got into audio, but just what you were into as a girl coming up and how you got interested in music?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I'm from Anaheim, California, and I grew up literally right next door to Disneyland. In the early 60s. Yeah, in the early 60s, our tract of homes was right next door to Disneyland. And I think it instilled in me, as it did the other neighborhood kids as well, this early notion that adults will create things. Adults will create a fantasy world. Like adults, we thought kids that, of course they built it for us, right? This is all for kids. But then seeing how much the adults are enjoying it, you recognize, no. This is a fantasy world that was built for everyone of all ages. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if many of folks from that neighborhood ended up going into the entertainment industry, because you see, one, how fun it is. So I felt kind of a pull, but it was specifically towards music. However, I didn't feel like I was born to be a performer or songwriter or anything like that. I mean, I was crazy about records and the radio, but I had no desire to be on the performing end of it. Anytime I thought of it, it just didn't feel right. But I wanted to be there. Yeah, I wanted to be there where records were being made. I wanted to contribute to that fantasy world. When I was about 9 years old, a relative gave me a Sonny and Cher album as a birthday present. And it's not something I would have chosen for myself, but on the back of that record was a picture of all the different personnel, the women who did their clothes and who
Oh,
stylists and their managers and the folks who
interesting.
work with them. And there was a picture of a recording engineer. And I remember thinking to myself, I think that could be me. I think I could do that. And
That's so cool.
it's so interesting to me that little children, if you leave them alone,
Yes.
they know who they are. Little kids know who they are. Adults are always trying to tell them, oh, you're going to be this, you're going to be that. But it was
Yes.
that thing of knowing, I think this is the right fit for me. I think this is me. Sort of a sort of very nascent kind of recognition. Anyway, as my life progressed, I moved when I was about 21. I moved to Hollywood with a roommate, and I began pursuing that dream. I figured that a good route for me would be to be an audio technician because I like doing that sort of thing. I like studying. I like systems. I like electronics. And I thought, well, I can be the person who repairs the equipment. And I did. I studied. I got a job at a company called Audio Industries. And in no time at all, in the late 70s, I was repairing consoles and tape machines in the greater Los Angeles area. I was in my 20s. I was pretty young, but I had trained, I had studied and worked really, really hard.
Wow.
That ended up being, in hindsight, not in foresight, but in hindsight, it was a really smart move. The next job that I got was in 81, I think, 80 or 81. I went to work for Crosby, Stills and Nash as their studio maintenance tech.
Amazing.
And then from there,
Oh my god.
and from there, Prince was looking for a technician, and he was my favorite artist in the whole world. So
I love that.
I can imagine. I bet he's really just amazing.
yeah,
And I hear he's just like wicked smart too.
Oh yeah. There were no flies on him, that's for sure. But in 1983, he was my favorite artist in the world. I loved R&B and soul music, and as I heard him, I had all his records. I'd seen him play live a number of times in LA. And so through the grapevine, I heard that my dream job was there if I wanted it, which was going to work for him. So I got the job and went to work as his technician. And then from there, he had me do the engineering duties. So that's how I transitioned from being a tech into being an engineer.
That's so incredible. How did that feel to have Prince, you kind of are whisked away almost into this ideal job?
Yeah, it's frightening, but at the same time, let's say, imagine you're a little kid and you've said to yourself your whole life, I don't know, be an astronaut, or I can be something in sports, or I can be whatever. And then someone says, prove it. Here's your shot. Prove it.
Right.
Of course you're going to try. Of course you're going to go for it. Now, all right, I might not be fully ready, but
there's two things that could happen. You can succeed and do really well, or you can just fall flat on your ass. Like, those are the two possibilities. But you're not going to know unless you try. So I love that.
Yeah. No, I never would have had the guts to do something that I didn't feel prepared for. But in every case, when I did step into a new arena, it was something that I had been preparing for a long time. So even though it was my first big rodeo with him, I knew my stuff at this point, and I was confident that I could do the job, and I did.
It's so inspiring just to even hear you say, I was prepared. I had the confidence, and I went. It's really incredible. It's extremely, extremely inspiring, because I think it's hard to do. It takes a lot of guts to just go and
do something. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to have confidence to actually play the drums. I was a bass player before, but I always wanted to play drums. And then finally somebody was like, here's the sticks, there's the drums, go smack it out.
Yes.
And, so yeah, confidence is key, especially in this industry.
It's a funny thing, too, because we have to have belief in ourselves that isn't always justified.
Right.
I like how I say to the students, I think I read it in a Zen book or something like that. You have to have great faith and great doubt. So you have to, in equal measure, you have to, on the one hand, you have to really believe in yourself. And on the other hand, you have to be sober and cautious enough to know, yeah, but this is going to be hard and I need to do it carefully. I need to do it conscientiously. I need to pay attention. I need to not blow this opportunity. So it's that funny blend on that knife edge between, yeah, let's go for it, and all right, yeah, but let's take it one step at a time. Too cautious and you won't be successful. You'll just be too afraid to go forward, and too bold, and you're going to think that you're better than what you actually are. So it's just like knowing how much pressure to put on the gas pedal of your career.
Oh,
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I love that. How was it to leave everything that was familiar and from California kind of across?
Well, I had as far as the technical stuff went, I had a safety net. There were folks I could call if I ran into a problem that I couldn't solve on my own. There were folks I could call out in Los Angeles. As far as leaving family and everything like that, well, I wanted the opportunity.
Yeah,
I wanted to do something great. I wanted to try something. So
and it's Prince.
It was Prince. It was my favorite artist in the whole world. It was a dream come true.
That's so great.
Of course, I was going to do that. And now, some of your audience, I don't know how they feel about this, because there's no right or wrong way, but I'll describe it anyway. Some of us are only too happy to have our identity be almost completely wrapped up in what we do for a living. To think of ourselves, we think of ourself, a notion of self. We define a self by what we do for a living. I am a painter, or I am a writer, or I am a blah, 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 blah. And other people find that concept offensive. I don't know who's right or wrong, because maybe we're both right. But for better or worse, I've always been one of those people who identified myself by what I do. And I've always been happy with that. Whereas other folks I know, they don't take that perspective.
Right.
Yeah.
I think, I can't say who's right. I think maybe you are both right.
Yeah. My brothers have 9-to-5 jobs. So they've always had 9-to-5 jobs, and they wanted that so that they could have something that I don't have. They have spouses, they have children, they have their weekends off, they have hobbies. In other words, they didn't want to define themselves by what they did for a living. They wanted to be more than what they did for a living. They wanted to be family men, or they wanted to be parents. And so they have a smorgasbord of life experiences that include the things that matter to them. I guess what I'm trying to say is that for some of us, what we do for a living is the only thing on the plate. It's 100% of who we are, and I have no idea if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know if we even have to judge it. It's just a thing,
right? Yeah, and I think it definitely depends too if that's fulfilling.
Yeah,
if they're not wishing that they had done something else, I think that's a big part of it too.
Right.
Yeah.
There's difference between like having a job and a lifetime career that you put your heart and soul into. You know what I mean? Like doctors put their heart and soul into their careers, So, but people that work at like the bookstore probably don't put their all in working at the bookstore.
There is a big difference. between having a job and having a career, and many folks are
agree.
happy to have a job where someone else tells them what to do and they do it in exchange for a paycheck. My brothers who work in commercial construction, that's what they do, and they're happy with that. I wanted a career where I could make a unique contribution to a work in progress, and yeah, I think a lot, especially in these recent years, about desire and motivation.
Mm-hmm.
It's so innate, and it's so important to determine
Yes.
who we are and what we do. One of the things that really drives me nuts is women feeling some sense of embarrassment or shame for leaving the music business to have children. Not all women experience that, but some women do, and that just drives me nuts. Because you shouldn't. A lot of women work really, really hard to get to a certain place in the business, and then they decide, I want to take some time off because I want to have a family.
Sure.
And that is they should be really proud of that.
Perfectly okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's difficult too. I think there's a lot of media aimed at women about choosing either or, career or family, and there kind of gets there can be a lot of pressure to try to do both all the time, or try to be one or the other, or
Right.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I think that can play into it too. I did want to ask, because I love Prince. I'm a huge Prince fan. Darling Nikki is one of my all-time favorite songs. I just think it's amazing. And I wanted to ask, was Darling Nikki one of the first songs that you were working on with
I can't
Prince?
say that I worked on it because it was the first song that I heard of his. It was, I think it was the first tape he had me put up.
Nice.
When I went to work for him, he had just completed it. He did it with the guy who had my job before me in his home studio, and he had me put up the tape for one reason or another, and I'll never forget that experience because I was a Prince fan. And there I was, alone in his house in the home studio. Outside the door was the little hallway, and there was his master bedroom, the big monitors, and here's this song. And I'm hearing it for the first time in the studio, and I just remember having that feeling of awe, just utter awe. And you kind of do that thing where you kind of look around and you're asking yourself, is anybody else here? Does anybody else hear this? Am I alone with this thing? He was so extraordinary. You have a lot of great moments in the studio. If you're in it long enough, you'll see some and hear some amazing things. I must tell you.
Once in a lifetime things.
Yeah, but that was one of them. Yeah.
Amazing. Which was the first song that you remember as an engineer with Prince?
The first thing was a song for the Jill Jones album called Mia Vocal.
Oh, nice.
Had me put up a microphone because Jill was coming over to do vocal. So
Wow.
I suppose you can say that was the first engineering I did with him. But it was he had just finished recording the live show at First Avenue in Minneapolis that would form the bed track for I Would Die for You, Baby I'm a Star, and Purple Rain. There was a live concert that night.
Wow.
And there was a mobile truck parked there. I wasn't there for it. I was just packing up my stuff and moving to Minneapolis, but there was a recording done. And so some of the first work we did was to take those master tapes and chop them up off of the big reels and put them on separate reels and start overdubbing and fixing them and mixing them and getting them ready for the ultimate release and for playback in the Purple Rain movie. A lot of the stuff I did early on was working with him doing incidental music for that movie, and a lot of rehearsal because the band was taking acting lessons. They an acting coach to help them, so they were taking acting lessons by day, and then at our rehearsal space we were rehearsing music at night for the live club scenes. So Vanity 6 was there, as was it was Apollonia 6 then, and as was The Time, and It was.
I was gonna say Morris Day.
Wow.
Oh my gosh, love Morris Day and time.
Ah,
Yeah, those guys were great. Just so good.
Oh, I bet. I bet those were such fun times too.
They were
amazing.
fun. It was an extraordinary atmosphere because Prince had just turned. Well, I had just had my 27th birthday, and
Wow.
he had just turned 25. So this is a 25-year-old who is now a millionaire who's getting ready to do a semi-autobiographical movie of his life,
Right.
which
I remember that
Warner
one.
Brothers has given a green light to.
Right.
And he's 25 years old and he has employees and he's telling people what to do. And he's got a director and he's got a manager and he's overseeing the making of his clothes and he's overseeing this script and he's juggling not just the making of a movie, but the making of his next album, which would be considered a masterpiece.
Right.
You'd be hard pressed to think of another individual who could pull that off. Now, teams of people could. Of course, the Beatles did Hard Day's Night, and they did the movie and they did the album, and both came out at the same time, but there were four of them.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
So, what was the transition like for you from tech to engineering and mixing, and how did you like that whole world aside from?
It was a gradual transition, that's for sure. Prince had me do engineering duties because, of course, I knew the equipment. The equipment I knew very, very well. So, of course, I could engineer. What I didn't know was artistically how to use the equipment. In other words, I didn't know, for example, that he always liked his hi-hat panned on the left and that the rhythm guitar would be on the right and that this is the reverb he likes on vocals, this is the reverb he likes on claps. So all of those artistic skills. It took me a while to learn. It took me a while to acquire. It took, I think, I don't know how long it took, but it took him a little while to recognize that I didn't have the same engineering experience as Peggy McCreary. That was the engineer he worked with. I pointed over my shoulder. Peggy worked in Los Angeles at Sunset Sound, and Prince liked working at Sunset Sound. He had been working with Peggy since 1980. So Peggy had been an assistant and then an engineer at Sunset, and she had seen so many sessions, so many more than I. She knew so many techniques for miking drums and miking piano and the things that I didn't know because I was a technician. I didn't know the artistic side of it. I learned pretty quickly, but there was a transition period. And I also had to learn Prince's habits, his ways in the studio. Now, fortunately for him, I didn't have anything to compare it to. So he taught me his methodology. And I became just the perfect engineer for him because he taught me how he liked things to go. After I left Prince and I went back to Los Angeles, that was a little bit of a difficulty because I tried to apply his methodology to other people, other artists. It didn't work. Other artists didn't work the way he did. So that was another transition period that took a little time.
Wow, I can imagine that would be a difficult transition back into the mainstream, especially Los Angeles.
Yeah.
At that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Crash, were you going to say something?
I was just going to read one of our viewers says, it's amazing to see these wonderful women talking about their experiences in the music industry.
Oh, thank you. It's just a pleasure. So, moving outside of the Prince years, how do you transition to Berkeley and to study and to research?
Well, in 1988, I left Minneapolis, came back to Los Angeles, and from 88 until 2000, I worked as an independent, self-employed, independent recording engineer, mixer, and record producer. I had a manager, like many of us did, once you reach a certain level in your career, and I worked all the time in one of those three roles, and sometimes all three, like with Robin Ford or with Nil Latta or some others. I would produce, engineer, and mix the record as well. Sometimes I would just do one of those jobs. And it was wonderful and exceeded my wildest expectations. But a funny thing started happening when I was in my late 30s. I started getting that old feeling again, the feeling I got when I was a little kid. When I was a little kid, I had the feeling that I'd really like to work in some sort of technical capacity making records. And I did that. And then I got this second calling. I started becoming more and more obsessed with the natural world, and in particular with the brains of other species, of non-human animals and consciousness. And my mind just kept going there, and I wanted that. I hadn't even finished high school, so I certainly had never been to college. But by the time I was in my late 30s, early 40s, I realized I'm going to have to make this happen. And it did. It happened. I had a hit record with Bare Naked Ladies. And back in those days, in the late 90s, when you had a hit record as a royalty participant, as a producer, you get a big paycheck. This is in the days before file sharing and Napster. Sorry, kids, but anyway, yeah, we used to make money, big money, for making records and selling records. And so the record was hugely successful. I think it went 5 times platinum. Yep.
Wow.
And with the money that I got, I left the music business in 2000, and I entered college as a freshman. First, I had to get my GED, and I got my GED, and then straight away applied to college and got into the University of Minnesota. I went back to Minnesota.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
I love Minnesota so much. It's where so many good things had happened for me, and I wanted to come back and start a new life where I had started my previous new life.
Amazing.
Yeah, I went to Minnesota for 4 years, and then McGill for 4 years, and got my PhD. I was a dual major in psychology and neuroscience, but my PhD is in essentially the brain on music. Essentially, how
that is interesting.
I really love it. I mean, it's the neuroscience of a musical experience. So anyway, to answer your question, after I got that PhD, I was offered a position at Berkeley, and they said, you can teach your virtual PhD in record production, and you can also teach your actual PhD in psychoacoustics or the music cognition courses. So I said, yeah, that'll work for me.
Perfect. Oh, that's amazing.
So you get to teach how the brain works when it's listening to music?
Yes. Now, music cognition is interested in things like how we learn to make music, how we learn to write a song, memory for music, likes and dislikes, why we like some records and we don't like others, rhythm perception, things like that, how we synchronize our body to music performance, and all sorts of things like that. And psychoacoustics is dealing with mostly the nuts and bolts, how the ear transduces pressure waves into a neural signal that we then perceive as music. So the bottom-up process as well as the top-down process. Last year, I was invited by a co-author to write a book, and I said yes. And in February, we got signed. We got a deal.
Oh, yeah, great!
Yeah, I'm currently writing a book on music listening, on these topics. Music listening from the perspective of a record producer, a brain scientist, and also something that I consider kind of underreported. Music listening from the perspective of a non-musician.
Oh, yes.
I'm a non-musician. My students, my students hear things in music that I don't pick up on. They're all well-trained musicians. They're at Berkeley. But I'm sometimes hearing things that they don't pick up on.
Yeah, I bet.
And it's nice to talk about music listening as the majority of us hear music.
I love that. And congratulations, by the way. That's really exciting.
It's coming along.
Yeah. I'm interested in that too. As a drummer especially, I listen to music in a in a particular way. But then some of my friends, they hear it kind of depending on how it makes them feel, rather than this technical side. And I always find that very interesting.
Yeah.
And the likes and dislikes can sometimes be based on the way it makes them feel instead of some technical thing that draws me into it. And I love that difference. I'm wondering, can you speak a little bit about, how that happens?
Yeah. In psychology, they talk about it as analytic versus synthetic listening. So people who listen analytically, as trained musicians do, can hear the individual pitches in a chord, for example. They can hear time signatures and phrases and bar links in a faster, more intuitive way than the non-musician can. They can recognize differences in timbres and pitches and things like that, and timing faster and with greater accuracy than non-musicians can. Musical training in childhood develops the auditory pathway so that you have heightened acuity. You become a listening athlete. So just like an athlete can move in ways that a non-athlete can't, God knows I'm a non-athlete. Yeah, when you see really athletic people move, I think my body's never done anything like that and never could. So it's the same thing with trained musicians. They just have a capacity to hear things, and so subsequently they do. They pick up on things thanks to the capacity for analytic listening.
Interesting.
But for us non-musicians, we can only listen synthetically to the global whole. So it's not that I can't hear drum parts. It's not that I can't hear. If you point things out to me, there's nothing wrong with my hearing. I can hear it. It's that when I listen to music, I'm regarding the whole object. And actually, that can actually be an asset for record producers. Have you ever heard of Gus Dudgeon?
No.
Gus Dudgeon he's probably pound for pound sold more records than just about any human being. Gus Dudgeon started his career at RCA Records, I think it was, in the UK in the 60s. He produced the Zombies, and he produced David.
Oh, okay.
He did all those Elton John records in the height of Elton John's career. So he's a non-musician. Or he's unfortunately, he's the late Gus Dudgeon. He's passed away, but Gus was a non-musician, and I had the opportunity to work with him. I asked him, how did you manage to produce records being a non-musician? And he just said, well, I didn't need to be a musician.
Right.
Musicians are all there on the other side of the glass. They need a non-musician in the room. And this was back when I worked for Crosby, Stills and Nash. And I remember thinking, that means this is within reach for me. I could do this.
I love that.
Yeah, I do too.
Big picture. Now, the advantage for musicians is that they can learn to hear both. They've got their analytic skills, and they can learn to listen synthetically to the whole big thing. Once we are past a certain age, the door has shut, the clay has hardened. I will never be able to listen analytically the way they do. It's too late for me at this point in life. I can only listen synthetically, but musicians have the capacity to learn to hear both ways.
Oh, wow. So what is a way to learn to listen synthetically?
I don't know any formal definition of how to do it, but one thing we try to do at Berkeley, certainly in the advanced production classes, but all along, we have students analyze records. So an important component of their education is to do a record pull. Have them come to class for a record pull, just like you would with a song pull, but this time you bring a record that you love, a record that just lights up your world, a record that melts you. And you have to be able to describe for us why. Why does this record just wipe you out? And what I don't want to hear is someone saying, well, it reminds me of when I was 16. No, I don't want to hear about you. I want to hear about the record. What is it about this record? Is it the rhythm? Is it the melody? Is it the harmony? Is it the sound design? Is it the vocal performance? Is it the lyrics? Connect with the formal elements of a record that you think might be responsible for why you like it so much. And by getting them to analyze records in that way, they're listening now to the big picture.
Oh, I love that. Interesting. Oh.
We have, how would you describe the effects of musical resonance on human physiology?
By musical resonance, do you mean resonant frequencies? Different frequencies? Music is, of course, comprised of frequencies from 20 hertz to 20K, but I'm not sure what is meant by musical resonance.
Probably frequencies.
We will wait for them too.
Yeah.
Yes, frequencies.
She said yes. She said yes.
So,
Ooh, I like this question.
frequencies are frequencies in sound are the same as frequencies in light. It's just that they're much slower. We can hear them, we don't see them. So when we're looking at objects, the objects are going to reflect most colors, but they'll absorb others, and that's why we see different colors. And of course, it can be said that a certain color can make you feel a certain way, but that doesn't mean that that's the same for everyone. One person's blue might be another person's green, might be another person's red or orange or yellow. So there are great individual differences in how frequencies affect us. Depends on a number of different factors, some of them physiological. For example, the pinna, our external ear, is a complex direction-dependent filter, and all you have to do is just move it a little bit, or push it back, or push it forward, or something.
And like,
Yeah, because it's going to boost and cut frequencies differently. So what not the same as what you guys hear, and we're all slightly different based on this. We're slightly different based on our age and based on well, let me say more about age. As you get older, the fluids in your body start to dry out. The shape of the cornea of your eye starts to change. The lens starts to change. So when people get to be 45 or so, they need reading glasses, and because their eyes have physically changed. When people get to be about 45 or so, their hearing changes too. People who have perfect pitch, right around the age of 45 or so, will start complaining to their piano tuner. Piano tuner will leave, they'll sit down at the piano, they'll hit an A, and it sounds like an A sharp. Because some of the fluid has dried out and there's some stiffening on the basal cochlea. So all of us have a unique hearing profile, just like we have a unique visual profile. Same thing with our sense of touch. Some people are really sensitive, other people not so much. And so we're all just, our sensory organs are slightly different. Some people on their tongues, they have extra sensory receptors and they're super tasters. Some people like salty, some like sweet. So it's a combination. How we hear is a combination of our physiology, how we've been built, our age, our gender. Turns out that men and women do hear differently. Estrogen affects hearing. Women have more of it than men do. So men and women hear slightly differently. The other thing is women have smaller heads. The time it takes an audio waveform, let's say snapping your fingers adjacent to your right ear, gets to your right ear, it goes around your head, gets to your left ear. We've got smaller heads. So our spatial localization is slightly different than a man's because it doesn't have to travel as far to get to the other side. All these little differences count. It also depends on your upbringing. Here's a fun fact. This is Jenny Safran's work. If you're a 6-month-old baby raised in North America and you are exposed to Balkan rhythms, gypsy music rhythms, really complex rhythms, you're gonna be able to learn those rhythms pretty easily. You're 6 months old.
Wow.
So they can teach you, habituate you to those rhythms, and then you'll notice when the drummer makes a mistake. This is so wonderful. She's a wonderful researcher. So you can pick out mistakes in these complex time signatures in the Balkan rhythms if you've learned them at 6 months old. By 12 months old, not so much. And if you're an adult, you can't do it at all. If you're an adult raised in North America, you can't learn it. It's too complicated. But the little 6-month-old babies can. Same thing with certain vowel sounds and things like that. So we form categorical representations of how things go. And
Interesting.
we get good at picking up on stuff that we're familiar with. And we're kind of oblivious to certain things that we're not familiar with. So to answer your question, there's a number of factors at work that determine whether or not we will respond to something. And it starts with genetics, just the size of your head, the shape of your ears, condition of your ears. It starts with genetics, and then it goes through development and what sort of sounds you were exposed to when you were young. And then another thing has to do with, and I'm writing about this in the book now, whether or not you were rewarded for engaging with a certain stimulus. So, for example, this has to do with the kinds of music that we like and the kinds of music that we don't like. Now, some of us, when we were young, had really pleasant experiences every time we went out on a limb and tried something new musically. And we checked out a band that would be, or an artist that would be not really the kind of music we listened to, but we checked it out and turned out we liked it. It's the same thing like with fashion or food. If you were rewarded for being brave and engaging with a kind of unusual stimulus out there, if that worked out for you, maybe socially, or maybe parental approval, or maybe your siblings said, yeah, good one, whatever, if you were rewarded in some way for engaging with new stimuli, next time you encounter new stimuli, you're going to do it again. When I was a little kid, some of the happiest memories of my life were when I discovered new music. And it made me very happy, and I felt very personally rewarded. Subsequently, I'm pretty open-minded to music. I have adventurous taste. On the other hand, the times when I tried to be adventurous with food or with fashion,
didn't work out so well.
Not good. So we've got these reward systems and these punishment systems in the brain.
Interesting.
They're competing with each other, and whichever one wins out the most is the one that's going to dominate. So some of us grow up and have very conservative taste in music. Nothing wrong with that. Conservative records sell an awful lot. And then some people grow up and they have very adventurous or limited or liberal taste in music or film or art or literature or just whatever. It's a product of exposure. Did you have a chance to see new stuff? And then whether or not it worked out for you when you did.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially with physical responses too. If something really backfired, and that could form some kind of bad association later.
Yeah, I know it did with me with fashion. I know the times I've tried to be adventurous fashion-wise. I thought, yeah, I should look like that. Oh, embarrassed. In various stages of my life. And the same thing with food. The times someone said, here, try this, you'll like it. And I've hated it. I have conservative tastes in food, but I have very liberal tastes in books and film and music and art, for example.
Right.
All of us have those systems are constantly at work. They're constantly seeking what we desire, and then they're evaluating how that worked out for us. Did you like it? Or was it a waste of your time or a waste of your money? And we have to factor into that too, our social environment. We want to from other people. We want approval. We want to fit in. All of us do. Even the folks who say that they are lone wolves, they want approval too.
They still want acceptance.
It feels good. So,
who doesn't? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's very human.
Yes, all of those things together are in that big soup that form us and our likes and dislikes and things like that.
I wanted to ask a little bit dovetailing off of the previous question, but it might be different because you're saying so many factors go into frequencies and how they resonate. But are there any frequencies that are kind of known to cater to a part of the body or to some kind of mainstream or mass appeal? Anything like that?
Not frequencies per se, no, but the organization of frequencies, yes.
Okay.
So, for example, humans have a sweet spot in rhythm. We like our music to be between 80 and 120 beats per minute, and our ideal sweet spot is right around 100 beats per minute. You bring people into the laboratory and you ask them, tap out a rhythm with your fingers, any rhythm you want. They will pretty much end up right around 100 beats per minute. That's the frequency that feels good for our body to walk to. We've got 2 arms and 2 legs, and 100 beats per minute is just right. There has been work done with binaural beats. A lot of people are interested in binaural beats. And the work out there has shown that basically it's effective. The binaural beats are where you have, let's say you've got 20 hertz. Or no, let's go up higher. Let's say you've got 30 hertz in one ear and 36 hertz in the other ear, and there's a difference frequency of 6 hertz. So you can't perceive it. You can't hear 6 hertz, but you feel this amplitude modulation at 6 hertz. Many people think that those binaural beats will put you in an alpha state or, I don't know, make you happy or something like that. The only studies that have shown a positive effect from binaural beats showed that it happened in people who were depressed. The people who are depressed have been shown to show some improvement listening to binaural beats. Folks who are not impressed don't show any affect to binaural beats. Here's another interesting thing. This is a cool thing. Our human nervous system oscillates at different frequencies throughout the day and night. So if you're dead asleep, like out, you're oscillating 1 or 2 hertz. If you're asleep, but maybe dreaming or moving around a little, you're oscillating between 4 and 7 hertz, thereabouts. That's a theta state. When you first wake up and when you're just falling asleep, you feel great, but you feel really slow and lazy and relaxed. That's an alpha state, between 8 hertz and 13 hertz, thereabouts. That refers to your nervous system and how often it's pinging. It's pinging the system. The beta band is the feel-good band, and that's between 15 and 30 hertz. That's when we're up and we're moving, but we're not stressed out, feeling good. And then the gamma band is above 30 hertz, much faster. That's when we're thinking or solving a math problem or stressed or exercising, working really hard. The cool thing is that music amplifies oscillations in the beta band. So when we're listening to music, music can pump us up in the morning and get us from that sleepy alpha state into the feel-good state of beta band activity. I'm going to take my shower, I'm going to get dressed, I'm going to go to work. And it can do the same thing when we're stressed and we're nervous and we're in that gamma state. Listening to music can pull us down from a stressed state into the beta band activity of, yeah, this feels great, feels good, I'm good now. Music is primarily used by most people for mood regulation, for regulating your arousal and your mood. And so that's in part because it's so effective at getting us into that sweet zone that feels good, that beta band activity.
That's crazy that just the progression of notes has such an effect on us both physically and emotionally.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's the whole world.
And psychologically, really.
Yes.
Sure, of course. I mean, we have to remember that the whole world is vibrating. Everything is vibrating. If you think about it on the atomic level, everything has a frequency. So frequencies in and of themselves are not special, but there are certain frequencies that map onto human physiology. It doesn't mean that we've got control over those necessarily, but if you listen to music, you're definitely putting yourself in a zone that feels good, as long as it's music that you like.
Sure.
I know when I'm angry and I listen to angry music, I feel less angry.
Isn't that cool?
Yep.
Like what kind?
It's just crazy.
What
Because
kind?
I just feel like I connect with the music. Like, this is how I feel right now. And since I can't truly express this is how I'm feeling, I'm just going to listen to this song that can, and it makes me feel better.
I'm cut from the same cloth.
Mm-hmm.
There was a study by Adrian North. He does a lot of work on the applied psychology and social psychology of music. He showed that women that like heavy metal and hardcore, and I'm one of them.
Me too.
Yeah, women that like that's great. That like that kind of music are actually less neurotic than the average
Wow.
woman. We it is music that we gravitate toward.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Is there more about why that association or that connection has
This
happened?
study was done 15 years ago in the UK, and he compared men and women and on different styles of music, and he used the iSync personality measures of personality. And iSync has measures like neuroticism and psychoticism and introversion, extroversion. Neuroticism doesn't mean like batshit crazy like we use it colloquially. It means how neurotic you are means kind of how sensitive you are and in touch with your feelings. And I think if I'm remembering correctly, I may have gotten that backwards. I think women are in general higher in neuroticism than men are, but the women who listen to heavy metal, it was something positive. I'm sorry that I'm mangling this, but it was something that women who listen to heavy metal are unusual women. That much I can say for sure.
I love that.
Yes. And psychoticism is it's a characteristic that males tend to have a lot of because it is an umbrella term that includes like aggression, but also assertiveness and a comfortability in like taking charge or being dominant or being competitive. And the women who listen to heavy metal have higher psychoticism than other women.
Oh, wow.
We're comfortable, not necessarily with aggression, but with being assertive.
Sure.
We're okay with that. Yeah, he looked at that, and he looked at
very cool.
Smoking pot, and just some other behaviors and how it correlated with the type of music that you're likely to listen to. But that was one finding I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, that is really
That
cool.
is really interesting.
Definitely want to check that out too. That sounds just really interesting, kind of up my alley. So Susan, you mentioned before about a trip you took to New Zealand, and I was wondering if you could talk about that.
Oh, this was great. It was 2 years ago, the summer of 2018, and I was invited along with Wendy Wang, who's a producer in Los Angeles, and Ebony Smith, who's chief engineer at Atlantic Records in New York, also a record producer, Laura Bettenauer from the UK, who's a record producer, and then there was Chelsea Jade, who's a songwriter from New Zealand. So the five of us women got together in New Zealand with 12 or 15 of New Zealand's best female songwriters. All these women songwriters had entered a contest, and the best ones were chosen to be in the studio with us five producers for a week. We were in Neil Fenn's studio called Roundhouse, and there were 5 rooms. So the way it worked is on a Monday, each one of us, 5 producers, would take a group of 3 or 4 women, and we'd write a song and demo it and record it from scratch, just starting from scratch. We'd get that done in a day. And then the next day, the groups of women would go to the next room, and they'd work with other producers, maybe to write a new song or to finish up the song they had done before. So anyway, we all had a chance to work together with one another.
Oh, wow.
It was a wonderful opportunity to see what women are like working in the studio without men around. I've certainly worked on records where I was the only woman in the room, and I've worked on records where there were both men and women. But this was a great opportunity to see what women are like. And one of the things that I really loved about it is how much more likely women were to share the ball, to pass the
Yes.
microphone, and how comparatively little they were interested in credit or taking charge. So
Ooh.
we'd sit around
Mhm.
and someone would say, well, do you have an idea for a chorus? Yeah, I've got an idea for a chorus. Well, how's it go? Well, it goes like this, 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 this. All right, that's good. Does anybody have an idea for a verse? Just based on what you just said, I think I've got an idea for a verse. Okay, you take the verse, you take the chorus. Anybody have an idea for the rhythm section? And you'd work until you hit a wall. You'd
Oh.
stop, and then someone would say, I can take that. And then the next woman would take it, and she'd build on it. And it was just like a ball being passed around in the room. Now, men have evolved to be competitive. Mother Nature
I love that too.
made them to be competitive. I mean, that's how men survive, by being competitive. I
Yeah,
don't
they'll be
follow.
like, I'll do it. Oh yeah, well, I'll make it better.
But once they
Yep.
get the ball, they want to hang on to it.
Mhm.
And women didn't seem to show any of that possessiveness over a song or the work we were doing. It was just like, this is
Oh.
what we are making. It felt so easy and non-competitive. It was perceptible. The other thing that I noticed that was odd, that I hadn't seen before, many of the women there were young mothers, and they had small children, because these are all,
Oh.
many of them were young mothers. And while they were at this songwriting camp for a week, their partner, who was taking care of the little ones, the mood in the room would shift a little bit every afternoon when it got to
Mm.
3 or 4 o'clock. And you could see right around 3 or 4 o'clock, their minds, the women who were young mothers, the mind would be elsewhere, because a caregiver was going to be coming and bringing the baby there, or the toddler, or the little child. And you could almost see it shift. Like
Oh,
they're
wow.
in the morning, lunchtime, they're all in to the work we're doing. But then this other important aspect of life, vital, crucial aspect of their lives, something that came out of their bodies, is about to come to the studio. And you can watch
Wow.
that focus be pulled toward
I was
that
gonna
other.
say disconnection.
Yeah, and sometimes these women would experience a little bit of agitation. You could, they're feeling a little pulled. They want to be all in on this
Yeah.
thing, but with children there, even if a spouse or a caregiver is taking care of them, if those
Oh,
children
wow.
are there, they're there. They're minded
Yep.
with
Mhm.
those children.
Mhm.
And that made me realize, I don't have children myself, and watching that made me realize that, see, this is an issue for us.
Yes.
I have not seen men experience that. With all the men, most of them fathers, whom I've worked with in the studio,
Interesting.
5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, when it's dinner time, they'll get a little distracted and they'll say, "Excuse me, I'll make a phone call," and
Yeah.
Yep.
check
Mhm.
in, with dinner or bedtime or something like
Mhm.
that. But
Sure.
I never saw that weight be that heavy with the
Wow.
men that I was working with. It's just a casual observation.
No, that's really interesting though. I think that, oh wow. There's just something so profound there about focus and women's attention being kind of pulled in different
But at the
directions.
same time, it's
Mhm.
so much more admirable because
Yes.
we are able to give our all in the studio. And then when it's about quitting time, we give our all to our family, whereas guys were like, well, my partner's got it, so
Yeah,
I'm good.
yeah.
Right.
One of my,
It's
And
like they
one of
have a
my
disconnection of the opposite thing.
ooh.
And one of my favorite sayings is, everything is the way it is because it got that way. I
Oh, I
am,
like that.
yeah, being scientific, being a scientist, I'm always ready to give credit to Mother Nature for behaviors and things that we see. Um, Men got a certain way, women got a certain way. Of course, many of us are kind of there on the dividing line. We've got some male tendencies and we've got some female tendencies. And of course, it's not a bimodal distribution, it's a continuum. But things are the way they are because they got that way. And I'm a big fan of considering natural processes in human beings to explain their behaviors, I don't ever fault women for being moms.
No,
No.
of course not. I'm not a mother, but Crash, you're a mother.
I am a grandmother.
You're a grandmother.
Yes.
And
So
I've
my baby girl had a baby girl.
Yeah. And I've seen you, be not pulled, but your attention is absolutely 100% depending on what you're doing at any given time.
It has to be. I mean,
yeah, and it's
I
incredible.
feel like because I'm a woman, I am the nurturer. I am,
yes,
I'm the mom.
Yeah.
So, but being a musician and a podcaster and doing my other band stuff and like, there's a time. I mean, they each have a huge part of my life. They are a huge part of my life, but.
Sure.
Family, if it's family comes first.
Of course.
So,
yeah.
But I did take a long time off. I took 10 years off when my children were little from my music to be able to raise them.
Oh, wow.
So I did my due diligence.
Have you heard of Trina Shoemaker? Do you know Trina Shoemaker?
I do not.
She's a mixer and an engineer, and she's just great. We just love her so much. Trina is married. She's got a child and a stepchild because her husband had a child from a former marriage. So Trina lives in, I think it's Tuscaloosa, lives somewhere in the South, and her day is spent in the morning. She gets the kids off to school, and then she's in her home studio in the shed that's in the back. She works all day, 3 o'clock. She stops, she picks up the kids, she takes them to whatever lessons they have to do. She gets the dinner on the table. She hangs out with her husband and her family. She puts the kids to bed, and then she goes out into the studio for another few hours at night to get work done. That's so doable in this day and age. In my era, it wasn't.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, the analog era, you had to be in the studio. So for Trina, who is a little younger than I, she can work now in this modern era, as other women can, and they can be working at home, and they can balance those so much more easily than they ever could before. Thank goodness. We need
that's great.
It's just no doubt about that. We bring a different perspective, a different sensibility. It's nice to have us there.
Absolutely. And we can,
and it just goes to show that women work super hard.
Oh, yes.
We have to balance work, family, jobs, family. We have a lot. And kids, they're a handful too sometimes.
Aww.
So,
women are tough. Women are tough, and we're incredibly strong, and we are incredible, I think, for our capacity to let others go first. We tend to be generous. We tend to give credit to others, and that's all good. Those are good qualities. Have to, if we're going to be in the music business, though, we have to figure out how to compete in a predominantly male world. We have to figure out a way of doing that and not losing our femininity, not losing what it is we like about ourselves, or I guess what I'm trying to say is we have to not compromise our sense of self, to be a part of this business.
I agree.
Absolutely.
It can be really tough to do that, especially with our band has had just, Crash, this, but not the greatest of experiences in studios with male engineers. And so it's, that was a big inspiration to kind of venture into this world ourselves. And I think that's also a necessary fact, but kind of unfortunately, we kind of got there.
Yeah, you
in
guys
an
had it
interesting
rough.
way.
Like, all the
It's-
studios I have been to had great male sound engineers and producers and stuff, but there are some out there that will bully the musicians or the bands into
Mhm.
Inexcusable.
changing their whole sound
Mhm.
into how they want it instead of how, that's what the band, that's their song, that's
Yeah.
that's their art.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of some sound engineers that really just want to change it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And some that were actively bullying or hitting on one
Yeah.
of the members, and that kind of behavior, I think, unfortunately, it makes it almost scary to venture into the field, even if you are really interested in becoming an engineer and finding a safe space to be in the field with navigating that kind of behavior.
It is profoundly true, though, that only the insecure men are going to behave like that. The ones who really are good, who really have confidence in their skills and their craft,
Mhm.
they don't behave like that. They
Oh,
wouldn't last
absolutely.
very long in this business if they did. So if you are artists and if you encounter men behaving like that, you're well rid of them. Well rid of them. You don't
Agreed.
need that. Yes, you can find a better engineer. I heard a story. This was so sad. I went to Australia a couple of years ago as well and did a week-long workshop there for women. And the very last night we were there, we were telling stories. This one, this was so sad. This young woman, just lovely, beautiful, kind of tiny, just like a doll, just gorgeous. Was recording her very first album. She got signed to a record deal, and it was going to be her very first day in the studio recording her album. That morning, her husband of 2 years told her he was leaving her. The morning when she was going to go into the studio to record her album.
That's when an artist is going to be nervous the most. The first day of a huge record deal.
To tell her.
Have a good day, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, but there was more. She went into the studio.
Oh no.
She's off her game a little bit because, her husband has just asked her for a divorce. The producer engineer hits on her.
See,
as this poor babe is telling us this story, she was trying not to cry, and she would start to cry, and she'd go, no, I'm not going to cry, I'm not going to cry. We all said to her, cry.
Yeah, it's okay.
It's really terrible.
Perfectly fine.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we gathered like hens around her, and we all said, no. This is not on you.
Mm-hmm.
You behaved perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
2 other people behaved really badly.
Yes.
And
that's so sad.
that hurts. It hurts because you trusted them. So
yes.
You cry because you trusted them and they hurt you. But you've moved on. I guess, we tell these kinds of stories to remind ourselves that stuff like that can happen. But it doesn't always
inspire each other, too.
Yes.
Like horrible things happen, but you know what? You get back up on that horse and you ride that sucker to town.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you find those good men. You find the men like Prince who wanted a female technician. Find the folks like Bare Naked Ladies who wanted a female producer. Find the folks like Crosby, Stills and Nash, Tony Berg, the producer who mentored me, who want a woman in the studio. These good folks, as well as, of course, working with other women. There are way more good people out there than there are bad. Find those good people.
Yeah.
I will tell you that occasionally I'm seeing how it's changing by our young male students at Berkeley. One time, my friends Wendy and Lisa were coming to Berkeley, and we were going to do a recording, and I needed
Wendy and Lisa.
Yes, yeah, they came in 2016, and I needed to find the best musicians, and I asked the kids. I said, you guys, who's the best drummer? I need the best drummer. I need someone really good. And they all just said, Helen De La Rosa. You got to get Helen. Okay, we'll get Helen. Who's the best bass player? Ellie Sands. Okay, we'll get Ellie.
Yeah.
The kids just happened to say, yeah, if you want the best, you're going to want Helen, or you're going to want Ellie and Annie Hoffman. These are the ones that you're going to want. And that just arose naturally. I didn't ask for a gender. I just said, who's the best? And that's what popped
That's
up.
awesome.
Another
That is so cool.
Yes. And another time, the kids, it was after the analog class, and 3 guys were in the control room, and they're talking very excitedly. They're really excited because Sylvia Massey's going to be coming next week, and they can't wait to see Sylvia. And they've seen her before, and she's coming back for a second time, and they were talking, and they all looked at me, and they said, Sylvia Massey's the greatest engineer in the world.
Oh.
I just said, you guys, do you know what you just did? I never in my life that I would hear 3 young men say, without any qualification, Sylvia Massey or any woman is the greatest engineer in the world. Just made me so happy. It is changing. This young generation they're thinking about who can do the work and not
Yes.
thinking about it in other terms. Not all of them, but boy, has it changed since
I
1978
love
when
that.
I started. Yeah.
Sure.
How was it working with David Byrne?
David is a consummate artist, as you know.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to ask you, because he's odd, but I love his brilliance.
Yes, he's brilliant. And the thing that stands out about him is, first of all, he's really funny and he's got a great sense of humor. He really loves to laugh. And he's very intelligent. A lot of smart people have a great sense of humor, and he's one of them. He's very systematic in how he works. I was the co-producer on his record, and as well as the engineer, and he let me come up with a schedule, and he really liked it when I said, here's what we're doing tomorrow, here's our schedule. And he liked knowing that work was being planned out. He was a family man. His daughter was, I think, 7 at that time. So he wanted to be home in time for dinner and be with his family. So we had a routine which he really liked sticking to. It was formulaic, but yet artistic. He liked the perfect blend of constraints and then freedom within those constraints. We worked really hard, but it was a real joy to work with him. I really loved him.
Yeah, he's just always been interesting to me, even growing up as a kid, and even now, like he's almost like kind of Tom Waits like, if you will.
Yeah, he's one of those people who is no longer tied to a specific decade. Like one of those people you can say is timeless. You know, someone like a Lou Reed or someone like that who has been an artist over many, many decades. He's one of them. I'm so happy for his current success right now. It's well deserved.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Nice. Susan, do you have any kind of I mean, I know you must have many standout moments, but anything in particular that stands out as an engineer and then as a producer that was kind of a moment that you really felt in the role, like you just really kind of, you know, in the moment where everything was clicking?
It's funny how often you don't realize those things until after the fact, but sometimes, I was just talking with students this week about that. We were talking about mixing techniques, and we're talking about craft and art, and we were talking about music in terms of its form and its function. So when you're learning to make records, your teachers are teaching you all about the form. You know, here's how you use the equipment, and here's how you manipulate this and manipulate that. You're learning all about the form. But we don't have nearly enough conversations about the function, how music functions for people. So there comes a time in your mixing when you'll spend years, and your engineering, years trying to perfect your craft. I mean, really perfect your craft so that your hands can do the thing that makes the gear behave in such a way that the signal behaves in a certain way, and you hear exactly what you want to hear.
Yes.
But then there's that moment or that day or that session where you've just made something sound exactly the way you wanted it to sound. And from that moment on, you've turned a corner. And you don't have to worry about the form anymore, because now your skill set will obey you. Now, that's just like a painter. You can paint anything you see in your mind's eye. You can make something sound the way you want it to sound. It takes years. Anyway, you transition into a new territory where now it's all about the art. Now you can just forget about the form. You've mastered it. You know what to do. Now all you have to do is worry about, what are you going to say with this art or with this form? Just like a musician, you practice your instrument for years and years and years and years and years. At first it won't obey you. Finally you get some mastery. You finally reach that point where I can do it. I can play. Now what do I want to play? So I think those moments, and I've had a few of them, where I realized I think I've crossed some sort of threshold. I think I've just gotten better in some regard, and that feels really, really good those days.
I love that. How do you feel with the transition to digital?
It sort of didn't matter to me, because I left the business in 2000. So all the records I did were analog. I worked on one record for a student some years ago that was digital, and it was the only record I produced, but I didn't engineer it. I hired one of my former students to engineer, just because I didn't know the digital tools. It seems, it doesn't seem automatically friendly to me. I like how my friend Tommy Jordan says that working with a digital audio workstation, he said, it's like kneading dough with one finger, and it's somebody else's finger.
That is so funny.
There, just clicking on a mouse. I'm used to having my fingers on the faders and sculpting sound. I'm used to analog tape, which is a non-linear storage medium. So all the techniques that I learned most of the techniques I learned don't apply to the new digital audio workstations. What does apply is the theory behind the techniques. Why do you use a compressor, or why do you use a limiter? When do you add EQ? When do you subtract EQ? When do you want delay? When do you want reverb? That kind of stuff. That all is the same.
Do you think that has an impact, or will have an impact, on how we hear music, or the psychological effects of something digitally made versus analog? And
yeah, I'm actually writing about that in the book. There's a chapter on that. In my era, in the analog era, engineers had one goal, and that was high fidelity. Our goal was to mic and record things so that the listener could imagine that he or she was there. It needed to sound real, high fidelity. That was really hard to do. In fact, it was impossible to do, because analog tape, nonlinear, but man, some engineers got really, really close. But once we transitioned into the digital era, high fidelity is super easy. If you want a great kick drum sound, you just go to Splice or something online, and bam, with the click of a mouse, there's your great kick drum sound. So now we can make records that don't necessarily reflect reality or what really happened. The old school records reflected a band playing in the studio. That's what actually happened. But today's records don't reflect that. So today we can create, for example, sound design tools let us create musical instruments that don't exist. All the records that I loved listening to, I can picture the drums, because I know what drums look like, and guitar and bass and piano and keyboard. I know what's making that sound. But with the new sound design tools, nothing's making that sound. It was just an algorithm. You just programmed it. So I can't have the same sorts of visualizations that I had to the older records. What this is doing is it's rewarding listeners who, this is my thesis anyway of my current research project, it is rewarding those listeners who like to have visualizations to music that aren't necessarily tethered to reality. Ever since I was a little kid, the thing I see in my mind's eye when I listen to music is the performer performing. I just assumed everyone did. When I listen to music, I visualize the performer. That's probably why I became a recording engineer, because it's all I see when I listen to this thing that I love is the performer performing. But I found out through this research project that I'm involved in right now, that's not even the most common visualization. I mean, people see all sorts of things. They see their own personal memories. They see themselves performing. They see like nature scenes like the beach or the mountains, or they see outer space, or they see like video game worlds, or sometimes just abstract shapes and colors. Some people don't have any visualizations at all. They're in a minority. Anyway, the modern records made with digital tools prompt or give rise to more artificial and abstract visualizations.
Wow.
I can't connect with electronic dance music because there's no performers performing. I can't see the thing I want to see, so I can't get the reward I want to get. I like the old school traditional.
I could see how that could kind of drive you a little crazy.
That's funny.
As a drummer, when I hear music, I hear a series of booms and taps and crashes, a series of note progressions, and like you say, I'm very analytical about it. I'm very analytical. I'm counting every beat. I'm counting everything. I need to know what arms and legs play with the arms, and it's weird how my mind works like that. So with music, I just see arms and legs and beats.
That's what you see in your mind's eye?
It's always just like a set of beats. And how the legs and arms move together to make those beats.
Do you imagine yourself performing the drums when you hear a record that has drums in it?
Yes.
Now that's something I would like to. I've tried to do it. Like I've tried to imagine myself, and sometimes I try like playing piano or singing, but I can never hold on to that fantasy. Something in my brain says, not for you. It is never.
I think it's just because I'm a musician, and so I've been in that spot. So, and I'm like you. I love learning. Like when I go and I watch other bands play, I'm the weirdo in the corner, just like staring down the drum.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. I'll do the
legs
same
and
thing.
arms because I want to see how they work and what he's doing, and like I don't know, I'm just weird like that.
I love being up near the band, but watching the band play. That's just and it has been since I was a little kid. That has been my chief reward, a visual reward, in listening to music. Angie, what do you see when you listen to your favorite music?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm thinking about it now. It depends on how many times I've heard the song. Now that I think about it, I definitely can see myself performing it for sure, and just really paying attention to the drums. But I love to picture the performers. If I really know the song, and I've seen a live performance maybe on YouTube of The Doors. John Densmore's, I love watching him play. So I love to actually picture like Morrison and Densmore, in their spots performing. So I do love to do that too. So I think it kind of shifts depending on how familiar I am with something.
My co-author sees abstract shapes and colors, and he likes to listen to instrumental music because the lyrics just distract him for the kind of fantasies he wants to have. We went out to lunch with a young PhD at Berkeley. Her name is Erica Knowles. She's a cellist, and she's teaching music cognition now. So we went out and had lunch with her, and I asked her, what do you see in your mind's eye? And she says, I see. It was the same thing, the abstract shapes and colors. And then she says, I can't stand to listen to music with vocals. She says, I can't stand to picture the performers He said, if I picture the performers, it ruins it for me. And I said, well, what happens when you go to concerts? She says, I don't go. I hate concerts.
Whoa.
She's a cellist. Both of her parents are professional musicians. She's been playing her whole life. But the reward her brain wants is
She
to
just
go.
likes the concerto.
Color.
Yes, the colors. So all of us, what I was saying earlier about rewards, all of us are seeking something that has rewarded us in the past and that feels good. We're all wanting to go to our happy place when we listen to music, and that's a different happy place for different individuals.
Yes.
Very different in some cases.
Yes, I agree. Crush, let's see. I'm seeing comments, but I think that's you.
It's Maxine and I.
Oh, okay. Cute.
She thought she was saying hello, ladies. She said hi, ladies.
Oh, nice.
And then she said that she thought that she was commenting as Maxine.
Oh,
But
that's
she
funny because I
totally
kept seeing.
understands like how I felt when I just see series of arms and legs going when I listen to music.
I love that.
But I also I like to hear how the beats fit in with the progressions, like a puzzle.
Nice.
Like I like to see where every note hits, and then I always have to count it out. I'm just so weird.
I picked up the counting habit when I was with Prince because he'd always be yelling at his band at rehearsal. If they missed an entrance or something, he'd go, count! So I'd be working in the studio, and okay, I better count. I started just,
oh my gosh.
I would automatically.
Oh man, every time I have like a long intro, I'm just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Like, and it's so weird. And
brains are one.
yes.
Yeah. So, Crash, do you like to improv a lot while you're playing, or live, or do you like to keep a structure? That's interesting to me. The difference in brains.
Both.
The desire.
There's always like a main structure, but I also do like to improv on like crashes or fills or something that will, because it helps me keep like where I'm at in the song.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
So if I make every little tiny part pretty much the same but just a little bit different, like I know where I'm at. So I cheat.
You cheat. Nice. I was just wondering if there is a difference. It's kind of psychologically. I cheat.
You mean between improv and
just
some musicians cannot improvise, and I guest edited a special edition of psychomusicology that was all about improvisation. So I had the occasion to go around to some Berkeley professors and ask, can improvisation be taught? And the general consensus was it can be. People who think that they can't improvise often have a mental block, and they just are kind of afraid to do it. So you teach them a few phrases, and it can be taught. But some people, that's all they want to do is just improvise.
The best way to do it is just get with different musicians and just jam with them.
Yes.
Because every musician will play something different. So jam with as many musicians as you can. You'll learn, number one, how to improv, like, boom, because you don't know what they're going to play. You don't know when they're going to change. You don't know anything. So, like, it helps just jamming. And I feel like jamming with other musicians pushes you to kind of step out of your personal comfort zone.
Oh, absolutely.
And let you try something out of your box.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
I really like that.
I love it. I have, some friends who love it just immediately, and some friends who, if they know they have to improv, it will cause such severe anxiety, just the thought of it. And that was surprising to me too. I mean, not surprising, just it's so different, that expression.
Yeah. There's a researcher named Peter Wust over in Denmark, and he did published a really nice paper on personality traits of classical musicians compared with rock, pop, soul, jazz musicians. And there are some really interesting differences in the personality traits. Um, the classical musicians are much more prone to performance anxiety than the folks who work in jazz or improv. Because if you're playing in a rock band or a jazz band and you make a mistake on a note, it's not the end of the world.
Nobody's gonna know.
Yeah, if you're nobody's gonna know in most cases. And if you're playing in an orchestra, that's totally different. The orchestral musicians tend to practice alone, but perform on a big stage with a lot of people watching, whereas the rock musicians tend to practice with other people. The classical concerts are advertised well in advance. They sell out the tickets. The rock thing, it's casual, so it attracts different personality types. The people who can't handle the stress of improvising and need that structure, need a score in front of them, need to be able to say, here's what's going to happen on Tuesday night at 8 o'clock when I sit down on the stage. This is the score I'm going to see. These are the notes I'm going to play.
I was just going to say, these are the notes I'm going to play.
Yes. Yeah, those are the folks who are more comfortable in classical music, whereas the opposite is true for the folks who are in jazz and rock. The styles that invite more improvising. Isn't it interesting that all of us have these different personality traits that make us perfectly suited for some jobs and not well suited for others?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what were your kind of favorite records growing up before you really got into the tech side and engineering? How did you kind of come to like, more of the R&B or rock and from an early age?
It's funny how that happens. It's another thing about little kids. I think if you leave them alone and let them find their own music, they'll tell you the music of them. They'll tell you what feels best to them. For me, it was always stuff that had a real strong rhythm section, R&B or blues-based rock. Always felt the best to me. There were some exceptions. Later in life, I learned to appreciate the Beach Boys, some of the deeper stuff from Brian Wilson. But when I was young, and in my teenage years, stuff that had R&B, soul, stuff that had a strong rhythm, or blues-based rock was my favorite stuff. Led Zeppelin, as well as Sly and the Family Stone.
Nice.
James Brown, I loved. And that's been, Prince used to call that the street you live on, and that's been the street I've lived on my whole life. I like to visit the other streets, but I always come back to the street I live on, which is soul.
And was everyone in your family into similar music, or was that more you just finding that on your own?
No. My dad liked, my family wasn't especially musical. None of them were, but in fact, they had some pretty awful records in their record collection. There's some really bad stuff, just bland stuff. I was always very, very attracted to it. And a couple of my brothers are passionate music listeners, passionate music listeners. I mean, we'll talk with such great heart and love and depth of feeling about the music that they love. So that's such a rich thing. Yeah.
Do you remember the first song that you listened to that kind of got you into a new genre, or the genre of the street that you live on?
That was definitely Papa's Got a Brand New Bag by James.
Oh!
My cousin, he was a few years older than us, came to the house.
Yeah.
I think I was about 8 or 9, and he had these 45s with him, and we put on Creedence Clearwater Revival and some other stuff. I think maybe Booker T and the MGs, who I still love today. And he put on Papa's Got a Brand New Bag by James Brown.
So good.
Yeah.
I love James Brown.
It just felt like, all right, you'll talk about, you go on vacation and you'll say, oh, this city was so beautiful, or this place was beautiful, oh, it was great. And sometimes you go on vacation and you just say to yourself, here's where I want to live. I want to live here. And that's because I liked other music, plenty of other music I liked. But when I heard James Brown, it felt like this is my home base. This is where I want.
Dude, James
That's
Brown
amazing.
was funkalicious. Like, I miss him so much.
Yeah.
Amazing. What a wow.
Yeah.
It's an incredible song to
I feel bad for this generation now because they do not know the amazingness that was James Brown. Like, nobody is teaching these kids this. And that breaks my heart. That's truly heartbreaking.
The thing that worries me about the youth of today and their experience with music is I'm afraid that they will assume that every record they hear has been pitch and or time corrected. You know, they hear Prince hit these really high soul preacher notes and they'll think, oh yeah, you melodined that, right? No, that's how he sang. Or
nice.
Clyde Stubblefield on drums or Jimmy Nolan on guitar, and you'll think,
those gotta be triggers, right?
Yeah.
No, that's how tight they played.
Nice.
And that's something that is so valuable and so precious to me. I hope that the next generation will recognize when they listen to those records, you're listening to human performance. This is how they performed.
I love that.
Our last album, the one that I just recently recorded with my punk band Hated Noise, some of the songs we did in sections because we knew that our sound engineer was gonna tighten everything up and make it in, tighten a nice little bow. Like we didn't have to play the whole song.
Oh, right.
We just had to play, play the first part, play the second part, play the third part. And so that was kind of disappointing because at some point I'm going to have to play those songs live on stage without a first part set. And I need it to sound just like what we recorded.
Yeah.
Right.
And don't you want, a song should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It should have an arc. It should have momentum. It should tell a story. And sure, that can be artificially crafted. Movies don't happen all in one take. They do separate scenes and then they cut them together. That's all perfectly valid. But still, you want it to at least feel like it has a beginning, a middle.
Yeah.
If it were me,
and as a musician, I want to be able to reproduce that live.
Yes, exactly.
And not sell something I can't physically do to my buyers because, studio magic. But thank you to our producer for doing that. But at the same time, I hope I can reproduce that.
Oh, I'm sure you can.
Yeah.
Oh, I know I can, but it's still. So Maxine says that is very, very valuable. And she hopes that for our youth as well.
Yeah, new music today is exciting, really exciting. I'm so happy that we're in a new time in music. It's not as conservative as it was 10 years ago, and definitely not as conservative as it was 20 years ago. The new innovations that are happening today are thrilling. I can't honestly say that the newer music is moving me to the degree that new old music moves me. I get really excited when I listen to a record I've never heard before by Clarence Gatemouth Brown or an old Bob Dylan record. I've never heard that before. That I connect with. But the admiration I have for so much modern music right now is crazy great. There's great stuff going on out there.
I agree.
It is, but like you said, it's not anything that you can't produce on an iPad. With the drum machine and stuff. I hope drum machines and iPads don't take over.
Oh, I know.
That would break my heart.
Same.
No, I don't think they will. I remember in 1979, 80, right around that time, the Walkman had just come out. And in recording studios, drummers were terrified, thinking that drum machines were going to take over and that drummers wouldn't work. That didn't happen. Horn players, string players were scared, thinking that synthesizers were going to totally replace them. That didn't happen. We grow new branches on the tree. We grow not in series, It's not like when a new thing comes along.
I just find
Yeah, I love that.
It's so much great joy and pleasure to actually get behind my drum kit and like
I
play,
agree.
just play whatever happens, and like it's really sad that sometimes some of the best songs or moments of my drumming life have just been warming up, messing around. I
Oh,
could never
yes.
re-record that or recreate that.
I love that.
And like just like Maxine said, she said nothing can replace the human element.
No,
Thanks,
never,
Maxine.
yeah, true, it never will. You guys, wouldn't you? I'm looking at the clock, and I
Oh,
know
sure.
I've got to get
No,
up.
it's totally right. If you have to go, absolutely.
You excuse me.
Let's see. Yes,
Any
of
more
course.
questions you wanted to ask?
Wow. I think we've covered so much ground.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And Crash has been able to actually put them in, so that's been great. I think I have one just question, just a last kind of parting question. If one piece of advice you could kind of, anything about psychoacoustics or anything really, what would it be about today's youth entering the industry?
I think the very best piece of advice I can give you, the thing that worked out the best for me and was most valuable to me, was a capacity for knowing myself. And I would advise people, know yourself. Know what kind of thinker you are. Know what you're naturally good at and what you're naturally not necessarily so good at. Start your career with the thing you do best and most naturally, because that's the thing you're going to be able to get up to speed on the quickest. And you need to get up to speed on it. If you're going to be part of the game, if you're going to get hired to do this, if you're going to be in it, you're going to be paid to do what you do. So start by becoming expert in the thing that you do most easily and naturally and well, whether it's songwriting or performing, singing, or engineering or producing or mixing. Take the thing that you are and start with that. And then from there, the world will give you opportunities to add to your skill set. It really worked out for me that I started as a technician. I became a producer later on. If I had started as a producer, I don't think I would have gotten anywhere. I don't think I would have been successful at all, because that was just quite a stretch for me. I needed to see other people do that first. It didn't come naturally. The tech stuff came naturally. The studying, that kind of myopic focus, that's the street I live on as well. I do that easily. So I started with the thing I could do easily, and then I built up upon it from there. I have seen that in other folks I've worked with, Greg Kirsten and Greg Wells and Tony Berg and Tommy Jordan and the Bare Naked Ladies guys, all these folks who were really, really successful, Wendy and Lisa too, started with one thing, became experts at that one thing, and then added to their skill set. So know yourself, know what you do best and most naturally, work on becoming world-class, competitively great at that, and then add to it from there. And that'll get you there.
Beautiful.
Oh, that's excellent. That is excellent advice.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. And it's just really a pleasure. And the group is just so excited. So
yeah.
Thank you so much. So inspiring.
It's nice to meet you and see you.
You too. Yes, you too. Thank you.
One of the wonderful things about technology is we.
Yes. Oh, thanks, Karen. Well, I hope to talk
Karen
to
said,
you
nice
soon.
meeting up with you, all of you all. Great conversation. Thank you, Karen, for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Karen.
Keep doing it.
All right, then. Well, have a great weekend.
All right, well, thank you again, Susan.
Have a great weekend and happy holidays and New Year.
Happy holidays. Thank you.
Good luck.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Happy holidays to you too. Bye.
Crash.
All right. And thank you. And thank you, the rest of everybody, for joining us tonight with our special guest, Susan Rogers, Dr. Susan Rogers from Berkeley, who did a bunch of albums for a bunch of people.
Very true.
And stay tuned for our next Musicians Hangout on Wednesday. All right. We will see you later. Bye.